Okay, here, Chris Bourassa.
Okay. We can move on.
Okay. So, this was Ali's suggestion. In Darkest Dungeon, was the depressive atmosphere inspired by the Vancouver weather?
Well, first, just thanks for having me and all of that. It was a very nice intro. Thanks for listening to what I'm about to say, which I don't know what it'll be because I didn't read the questions you gave me because I wanted to just show up and make it honest and not prep. So I'll try to be as candid as possible. Sometimes I swear a little bit. Is that okay? Or
yeah, that's okay. But
is everybody
could
okay?
you speak a little bit closer to the mic?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
Okay. It was not at all inspired by the depressive atmosphere in Vancouver's weather. I love this climate. It drives me crazy when people complain about the rain and then they live here. It's like, what are you doing? This is what the mountains are doing. They've been here before you. Just get on board or move. I don't know what to tell you. So I grew up in Yellowknife. It was like minus 40 and dark in the way. It was like the new True Detective. It was awful, and I came here, and the smell of the rain kind of like got into my like little kid brain, and I always wanted to live here. And people make things here. They make movies and comic books and cartoons, and no one made shit in Yellowknife except for gold mining, and even that resulted in like a. Anyway. So yeah, I love it here. And so to me, it's not depressive at all. I get burnt out in August. Like that sucks. Like 35, like what are we doing? But, you know, that's me.
Okay. Well, if someone were to go, wants to go to Yellowknife, what should they do? Asking for a friend.
It's good luck in certain cultures to conceive a child under the Northern Lights, so you can go for that reason. There's a lot of mosquitoes in the summer, but it's quite lovely weather, and it's sunny until like 3 in the morning, so you can go for that reason. It's 2 great reasons.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we kind of answered this already. Oh, look.
Oh, that's me.
Do you recognize this photo?
Yeah, I think I took that photo.
Yeah.
It's a little surreal, to be honest, like all the scrubbing of the social media. I kind of forget that it's social. Yeah. I ended up here because, what did I do? I'm on the run in the most expensive city in the planet. No, I came out here to do an animation degree at this school that was called CDIS, the Center for Digital Imaging and Sound. Also the Center for cheap student visas at exorbitant tuition prices. But it was not a bad program. I just hated animation, like hated it. I'm not technical at all. Got a couple of our programmers over here. They're going to nod in agreement. I hated rigging. I hated the stupid invisible bones. I hated learning to model in NURBS. Like everyone thought that was going to be the hot shit. Totally wrong. So I hated all that. But I love doing like concept art and illustration and that kind of thing. So.
Awesome. And what keeps you in the studio here? This is what is this photo from?
I think this is from Halloween. I'm not dressed up. I'm not in this photo, thankfully. What keeps the studio here?
Yeah.
As opposed to where? Like Montreal, I guess, is the only other.
Where else it could be? Like, why do you and your colleagues like living here?
I don't know. I mean, I really like it here. It's a beautiful city. Everybody knows this. I feel like we covered how amazing the rain is. But we're just here, and like now we're kind of a little bit more dialed into like, you know, some of the great people making games and been part of this kind of community for a little while. So I think it would be hard to like uproot. Also, I got kids because I'm old now and I can't imagine moving. It sounds like a nightmare.
I don't have kids, and moving also sounds like a nightmare, so agreed. Okay, so how did you start making games?
When I was at that school, I did a 2D platformer called Hateful Chris. I had watched a ton of South Park and read No Logo by Naomi Klein, and I thought I had some real clever, subversive ideas. It was pretty juvenile, but I did make a game. I went from start to finish. I did it in this like click to author kind of program. I made all the art in a vector illustration tool and then exported it all as like raster frames. I did it all myself. And then later I brought on a friend to help me, and we pitched that to a local studio and basically got hired. And then from there, we pitched it to Ubisoft, and we worked on a PlayStation version of it for about a year until they canceled it. But then I was in the game industry. Like, I had work and I had experiences, and you know, I picked up some like really cool buzzwords, throw a few of those around. And
what were the buzzwords back then?
I don't know, this is going back a while. Cadence was really big. We all had to get in the right cadence together. Fucking, I hate it. I hate it so much.
Or like that's where you got it from later on?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so.
I'm referencing Ryan Clark from Brace Yourself Games with Crypt of the Necrodancer. Their main character's name is Cadence. So,
yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess what happened after Hateful Chris, which I did bring up. And for also, disclaimer, I dug this out. I was looking at Chris's Moby Games list, and I'm like, wait, what is this first thing, Hateful Chris? and I started looking, I'm like, did he really work on this, or did someone just put this on his list for, like, to troll him or something?
No, I lived in a tent in Australia for a year, and then when I came back, this was the, like, legit reason. I came back to, you know, civilization a little bit, and I found it really jarring. I found TV really, really hard to watch. I found, like, so much advertising everywhere. It was like really off-putting. And so this is like this like counter-consumer thing. And then yeah, I read like 2.5 books and decided I was like a counterculture genius.
When I was reading the premise,
now I got a mortgage, so you win, society.
When I was reading the premise and hearing the counterculture stuff, I was thinking like the counter-consumerist. I'm like, man, this sounds like today, and I guess that's the same idea. People have been saying that kind of stuff for decades, right?
Yeah, it's not like any of this is new or going anywhere, so buckle up.
We saw the analytics earlier, so. Yeah, I guess after Hateful Chris.
I got a job at Digital Eclipse, it was called, which became Backbone, which lasted for a couple of years. And I moved up like, hey, what?
My dad.
What?
Okay. Are you a Vavasor? Who's your dad?
Peter Phillips.
Oh my God, you're a Phillips. Yeah. The twin Phillipses were like the programming legends of that company. That's amazing. Please say hi to your dad for me. They're very, very great guys. Nice, cool. So yeah, I moved up there. I got to a point where I was like, it sounds like a homo. I moved up so quickly. But I was like 26 and I was a studio art director, and I'm like, this isn't right. Like, I don't know enough to be in this role as effectively as I should. So I took a job as a concept artist at Propaganda, which used to just be in the Bank of Montreal Tower, which is no longer the Bank of Montreal Tower. But I voluntarily like demoted myself because I'm like, my skills just aren't where they need to be. And I feel like, you know, this was before AI, but trends will come and go. But as long as I had this like a proficiency at art, I could make a living, right? So I'm like, I'm getting too managerial too young. So I made a little bit of a pivot, and I'm really happy with that move. I worked with an amazing concept artist called Daryl Mandrick, who's like just the best in the industry as far as I'm concerned. Certainly now, even then he was amazing, but now he's like untouchable. So that was great, and it was a nice like kind of reset. I kind of miss having less responsibility.
Your staff here hear that? I guess they probably know, right?
I don't know if they know. I mean, I don't talk about myself all day long. This is a little weird.
Oh, okay. Let's come back to this.
Okay.
Oh man, I want to get to the because you touched on it. These games. These are some of the ones that you were doing, like.
Yeah. So this is Moby Games, though.
Okay.
Like it's not properly vetted. I had nothing to do with this.
Okay.
I talked to the art lead on Bomberman Live about Bomberman Live maybe once or twice. We played poker a lot. That was my involvement on Bomberman Live. Very happy to be part of that team. Sonic Rivals, I was actually the art lead for that. And that was, this is going online, right?
Yeah.
It was a nightmare. Sega was not cool. I don't care who knows it.
Well, that's why you're making your own stuff now.
That was one of the reasons. Client work is very, very demanding. Some of you, many of you will probably go into client work. I did it for 15 years. It can be quite rewarding. Not all clients are bad, but you have to take that part of yourself. It's weird. You have to be able to channel your creativity in such a way as to achieve results, but you have to also oxymoronically accept that you are executing someone else's vision. And if you get yourself in a twist over that, you shouldn't be doing client work. So it becomes a process to manage. I'm joking a little bit about the Sega guys, but they were tough. They were exacting clients. They had a lot of weird little nitpicks, and they would change their minds, and we'd have to refactor. And you have to just accept that about that style of work. Like, yes, you're an artist, but you're a commercial artist. You're not, making abstract or like really fine art that goes into a museum. It's legitimately artwork, but it's for a commercial purpose. And so you have to, internalize this idea that you got to do great work, but you also have to be able to pivot on a dime and put your ego to the side. So I learned a little bit about that on Sonic Rivals.
Okay, let's go back. Where were we? Oh, here. Okay, this is a big one. I'll let you take a step first. What is the biggest difference between the game development industry then, I guess like those early years for you, and now?
Okay, but to be clear, this was even before me. Like, I'm not that.
I put it there because I
like, me and my cool skateboarding gang weren't like, playing this at the time it was released. Just,
I didn't put the years so to not confuse
Cool.
people.
I think so. Eye of the Beholder 2 was the game that I played, not 1. 2 came out after 1. But I love those games. Legend of Grimrock kind of redid that, like, sticky grid movement, but it's kind of 3D. That game kind of changed my life and really got me into video games. I was really a really cool kid, so I did a lot of maps at home alone on grid paper. S for spider. Just make sure that you get everything on there. But what I loved about it was that it didn't hold your hand, and that's something that we directly put into Darkest Dungeon. Like, part of the joy of playing the game was learning how to play the game, and not hand-holding. And we were coming up with, I don't want to jump around with the slides that you made too much, although I have no idea
The slides
what they are.
kind of jump around too, so it's okay.
Okay.
Go off.
Yeah, when we were making Darkest Dungeon, it was during the kind of like, almost when we were conceptualizing, it was at the apex of the mobile game rush, where like onboarding and retention was like the biggest deal in the world, and people were getting like shower. I mean, it's still like that, but like all games were aspiring to shower you with rewards for like, you made a profile, have like 5 widgets, and then there's sparkles and everything everywhere all at once. And we really were like, it's too much. Just take it down a notch. Maybe no onboarding is kind of the best way to onboard. Maybe creating mystery around the mechanics, it could be compelling. And yeah, it's not a learning curve so much as that it's a learning wall, but people learn to climb it if everything in the game is compelling them to do it. They opt in, and then they kind of get these amazing moments of like discovery, and they feel smarter than the game sometimes when they figure out something that, we put it in there, they're not smarter than the game, but they feel that way, which is a great little chemical release. But that was like a big inspiration for us, is like, how do we go back to kind of this age where like, I didn't know this skill could do this, or I didn't know how this actually worked, and then they talk to each other and talk to your friends about it, and try to recreate some of that. Yeah,
that kind of thing is definitely my favorite thing in games. I'm playing Lethal Company, which obviously was really popular with streamers and creators recently. But then my friends and I we said like, no, we're not going to watch anyone. Like none of us is, like knows anything about this game, and it felt so much more exciting. So we don't even know like what is in the world that we're going to. Like we don't know what we can even interact with, and yeah, that's something that I love in games as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think like there is an abundance of content to consume. We're drowning in content in television and movies and games. There's like, when we released Darkest Dungeon 1, there was something like 6,000 other games on Steam. When we released Darkest Dungeon 2 in May last year, there was 88,000 other games on Steam. It's over. it's too much. So the only thing that's left when like every art style, every mechanic is proliferated everywhere, the only thing we have left to trade on is like surprise and delight. And these are not quantifiable things. You cannot KPI a feeling of wonderment. And that I think is at the heart of why a lot of us want to make video games, is to somehow take like insane programmer math and flaky artists and producers who don't understand that fun doesn't fit into a schedule. That's not a dig. I just, and you mash all of these talents and different types of brains all together, and everyone is trying to pursue the moment where a player is like taken by surprise, caught off guard, shown something they weren't quite expecting. It can be small, it can be big. But I think that's like the most important thing. It's the only commodity that trades now, is that feeling.
Wow.
That's my opinion.
People put that on the quote board.
Is there a quote board? Oh, sure.
People's notepads.
Oh, okay.
Would you also say like that's kind of the premise of like horror movie games as well? That's a good example.
I think it's the premise of anything successful. Anything. Like the first time you saw Downey Jr. get not the bullshit nano suit, but the real Iron Man suit that required a whole machine to put it on him, and they're doing the camera pan around him, and it's got like heavy metal playing, and he's like locking in. Just that paved the way for a 15-year multi-billion-dollar franchise. That shot. That's my position on it. I'm not going to negotiate. I think that those moments are really powerful, and you can find them in great TV, great comedy even. And certainly in great horror, and in great games of all genres. If you look at all of the hit games, they trade in that, or there's a nugget of it in there somewhere, and once you get it, you just like want more. It's the most like addictive substance known to man.
And a little bit on movies, but yeah, how did the initial idea for Darkest Dungeon come about?
We wanted to create something a little bit more subversive. A lot of RPGs. I love a loot grind, but it's a power fantasy, and your sort of experience is dictated by like the size of your shoulder pads and how many glowing runes and stuff you have on you, and you're just like cutting down thousands of monsters. And Tyler and I just started talking about like what that would even do to a person. Like you're adventuring, but adventuring is just like a holiday filled with inconvenience. It only becomes an adventure when you look back on it, right? But no, we've romanticized adventuring to be like this amazing experience, and we all get to cast lightning bolts. But you'd be like running out of food, you'd be wet and miserable, you wouldn't get along. You can barely hold a game team together, never mind a party of 5 people with magic powers fighting orcs. Like, come on, there's gonna be huge blow-ups. And we just thought like, that's the game, that's the experience of being an adventurer. It's people who are flawed, trying to get along with people who are flawed in extremely high pressure situations. And these examples I've mentioned in other places, but I think pound for pound, Aliens does the best job of a huge cast, and everybody has an arc you remember. Okay, so they drop a couple Marines like Draco, oh my God, what's his deal? But like most of the signature kind of Marines you remember, even though they get like less screen time than Boba Fett. In the original movies, not the giant teeth like Mandalorian thing. But everybody gets this kind of like neat character arc. They fit into a box and they enhance the overall narrative. And they're all under pressure, and you see kind of how that pressure like changes them and affects them. Some people get to have their glory moment. Some people rise out of kind of insecurity into something amazing. Other people who, come on big and strong, kind of break under pressure. And I just love this film because, especially at the time, no one expected a woman to be an action star. And so that's the biggest subversion of all. And I think that was transformative for a lot of audiences and gets back to what I was saying about that wonderment. Like the first Alien movie, you expect the captain, like the like 30-something-year-old kind of handsome for the time captain to be the star, and he's not. And when you realize he's not, I can't imagine what it was like seeing that movie in the theater and being like, wait, the movie's about her? Like, incredible. And she carries it. And this movie is even better, in my opinion. But same thing with Band of Brothers, same thing. Small group of people, hard situation, trying to get along, imperfect situation, poor information, tempers are running high. That's what the Lord of the Rings would have been, you know.
You want to say anything about Bard's Tale?
Never played it.
I thought I read it somewhere, but...
No.
Oh? Maybe so. I will find what
I've heard it's very good.
found it, and I'll ask later.
Sure.
Okay. What's a quirky memory from the game's development?
Okay, I don't know if it's quirky. I'm not a very earnest man. I have a hard time with like a lot of big feelings. I just use a lot of humor to misdirect, and it's fine. I had to tell my counselor one time that I'm like, you got to be harder on me. Like I'm running circles around you here. But we were squatting in the back office of this local studio that was essentially falling apart in real time. I'm just going to paint a quick picture. I'll be quick. There were 3 grown men in a glass office, probably about the size of this, yelling at each other, sweaty, red, like pizza sweat, out of shape game developer. You can see the condensation on the walls. And they were arguing about where the magic in the world came from. Was it in the crystals that came from the earth? Or did it fall in rocks from the sky? And they were, like, this was the state of this studio. They're just screaming at each other. And we're in this back room, like, this place is falling apart. We got to get out of here. But they had graciously let us use this room. It was on, like, Main and Hastings. Like, it was rough. But we pushed the launch button in that room. So I remember the smell of the rotting hardwood floor. I remember stepping over the human feces that morning that was in the door. That's not a joke. That's just a fact. And I remember these guys yelling at each other about the origin of magic in their hoverboard game. And all of this like kind of swirls around, and we pushed the launch button, and we couldn't get Steam data right away. But then all these like streamers, before it was quite a business, like it was just taking off, but all these streamers were playing it. And I just blurted out, like, I think we made a hit game. And like I looked over at Kier, who's over there, and he was like, he's always like, he kind of gave me this like big smile, and I was just like so like rattled. And then I kissed Tyler on the mouth. And that was a good day. It was a good day. I'd do it again.
Seems like a very good day. Congratulations. Before that point, did you expect it to be so well received?
No. I don't think you can live in that place. That's insane. To be like, you're going to make a game with like 3 to 5 of you. Yeah, I had $24,000 from a very well-crafted tax return. We got about 20 grand each from the $300,000 Kickstarter. The rest, like each as in like, we'll pay you to live. We spoke to a publisher before the game launched. They offered us $500,000 and we're going to take 30%. And this was at like the 11th hour. We were all running out of money. It was really scary. I had a reserve of $15,000 that I told my wife I wouldn't touch, and I was about 4.5 into that. She knew. But it was dicey. It was really scary. We were all very, very stressed. Nobody goes to like the full indie meetup and is like, yeah, we're gonna kill it. Like the arrogance would just be appalling. What I hoped was that I would earn $300,000, because that is $150,000 a year for the 2 years that I killed myself to make this game. which was about 30 grand a year more than the highest I'd ever earned working for somebody else. So I was like, that was my metric. If I can get a $30,000 a year raise for 2 years, the amount of trauma that I've inflicted on my personal life will be worth it. So I'm glad we did a little better than that, but that was my target. And we were very worried. We had no idea what to expect. I will say this though, before we started, like, you know, I had a mortgage and so did Tyler, and you know, we weren't like kids, you know, we were kind of like mid-30s, right? There's a big opportunity cost to starting an indie studio at that stage in your life. So we didn't want to get over our ski tips and end up in a situation where we were spend ourselves broke, or we were like financially destroyed for having tried this thing. So that's why we did a trailer first and put it on YouTube to see if there was even any interest at all in what we were doing. And the response to the trailer was good. And so we were moving ahead with making the video game and building towards a Kickstarter. Now, the Kickstarter was like another check-in point. So if it funds, cool. If it overfunds, great. If it doesn't fund at all, we're done. If it funds barely, we know that we have a lot of work to do and moderate interest. So we have to scale back the game that we're gonna make, or we're gonna kill ourselves. So it overfunded, which was great, but we took that as a sign of confidence. But heading into the final stretch about like 10 months later, all that money was gone, and all we had was like a really nice Kotaku article. And you can like reread that as many times as you want at 3 in the morning before you go to sleep, but it does not guarantee that you're gonna be okay after you hit the launch button. So we had no idea. We didn't think about, you know, like having success. We thought about making the best game we could. And that's not a line. That's all we had room for. I think you have to kind of become the thing a little bit. And that's certainly what I did.
What do you think was the biggest factor that helped the game do so well? You need more water. We can get you more water. It looks like it's...
I'd love a little more water, yeah, sure.
Thank you. Ali's on.
Thank you. I don't think it's a single thing. I think the like subversive idea at the core is immediately attractive and interesting, right? Like you can tell people, you know, what happens if your adventurers get like stressed out and bicker with each other, and everyone's like, haha, wouldn't that be neat? So that, there's something there for sure. The art's really good. But the art is the signage on the outside of the restaurant, you know? Like it gets you in the door, and it's the vibe when you walk in. And I'm fortunate enough, I've been to some nice restaurants, and I would much rather, it's my own bias, have like a beautiful space to enjoy food in than a fabulous meal in a hole in the wall that feels dirty. But I think art's job is to make you comfortable, to invite you in, even when making you comfortable means making you uncomfortable. But it has to be beautiful and consistent and deliver on the theme that it's trying to get to. But it's design's job to keep you there. And without a good fusion of the two, if they're at odds or they're not both pulling their weight, you're either gonna not get enough traffic in the front door, or you're gonna get people who leave and never come back. And so it's really hard to sort of look at something as complex as a game and be like, what was the one thing that stood it up? I think it was a great menu. The restaurant looked as good as we could make it, and we made some really good meals at the most important time in the game's development and allowed us to get some critical mass. So I think it's a bit of a confluence, you know, which is another great business term. You can use that.
Yeah, I think anyone who's played the game would definitely agree that it had all three of those things, at the very least.
I mean, I could go on, but.
Okay. So this is asking about Darkest Dungeon 2. How did you and the team decide to make something that was quite different?
I'm doing a GDC talk about this with Tyler at GDC. So it's interesting that you want to know this. Me and him were sitting in my basement, and okay, I don't know how to sum it up. Haven't done my talk yet. You have two options when you sequel, okay? You can do what is, you know, we'll call it an iterative sequel, or you can do kind of like a spiritual successor. They both have their risks. We talked about this a lot. Do we even want to do another Darkest Dungeon game? Absolutely. That was not the question. What kind of shape is it going to take? We could certainly have up-resed the art, set it in a different location, had different monsters, and done the same exact game. I could have drawn it twice as well, 3 times as fast, and people would have cared 10% as much because they have already consumed this flavor. They have seen Darkest Dungeon, they've internalized it, they recognized it. They're not going back for seconds with the same verve that they went in the first time. It's unavoidable. You already know what that is on your palate. I don't know why I'm doing all these restaurant analogies tonight. I'm sorry, but that's where I'm at.
I guess we needed to get more pizza.
The pizza was fine, and just So the other thing was doing it that way is like, I guess that's what we do, right? We made a game that was successful. I guess we just make that game again, but better with a few new, isn't that, 2 kids, that's the script, right? But we just didn't want to. And when we made the first game, it got dark. It was very, very hard to make video games, and everybody says that now on Twitter, making games is hard. Making games is fucking hard. And what they never taught forgive me, but everyone goes do you have what it takes to make a game? Do you have what it takes? And I don't think anyone really thinks about what that means. It's taken from you. It takes. And so the creative process, especially under financial duress and, the crushing weight of your own imposter syndrome, because we're all creative people and we hate everything we do the minute we do it, but we got to keep moving forward somehow. It robs something from you to birth an idea and drag it kind of kicking and screaming out of yourself and put it into the world. And it's always imperfect because no one can make anything perfect. So it's always going to let you down a little bit. You know what I mean? The only thing that keeps me in the zone and on that road is that I love the thing that I'm trying my best to make. I'm trying to live in service of this thing and make it. You don't get a lot of game cycles in your life, a game takes 3 to 5 years. How many do you have before you're just toast? Not a limitless amount. So if you're going to invest your life, your time, which is the only non-renewable resource you have, you should probably try to believe in it. And I recognize that I started by talking about client work, but we're here now. So I think loving it was really important and wanting to make it. And when we realized that making a sequel and just bringing everything forward, there were no surprises on that road. There were no unforeseen circumstances. There were no happy accidents. We would know exactly what it was. It would be cost effective. We would make money, no question. But we wouldn't love making it. And so we're like, what else can we do? We don't want to let go of the world. We don't want to let go of the characters. We love the whole stress thing. What's a different experience that we can create in this space, knowing full well the risk? And we're living the fallout of the risks. The game is not as well reviewed as the first game. It can't be. It does enough of the same things and a few things very differently, and that creates a little bit of dissonance with people. We knew that before we started. We knew that it would not be as well reviewed. It's just the way of the world. But this is the game we wanted to make. We wanted to make a road trip simulator, not a hockey coach management simulator. We wanted to have kids in the back of the car yelling which direction to go. We thought a cool evolution of the affliction system was a relationship system, because a relationship is just an affliction that 2 people are sharing. Put that on the quote board. So we wanted to do it. Tyler was really excited about rejigging the combat system. I was really excited about, the dungeons are actually regions of the world and growing the character proportions up. So suddenly we kind of found our passion again. Not that we lost it, but we were really into this. And we knew full well that it wasn't going to be the it game the second time out, because people were acclimated to it. But we could do the best we could, and we could have enough in there that was special and fresh to us. And it was very hard to make this game. It was not easy at all. And we took a lot of risks, but we managed to get through and launch the game. I'm very proud of it. I love this game too. But that's kind of why. It was when you get deep into it and everything's on fire, if you're not really passionate about the thing you're trying to build, it will be much easier to give up. And I'm not an optimist.
You guys can tell about the game.
There you go.
Okay, I think we might need to go through some of these quickly or skip some of them.
Yep.
But I think this is interesting because I wanted to have some questions about running a studio and starting your own studio because I think a lot of people are thinking about that now, obviously with the current job situation. But yeah, so how did you decide to grow Red Hook into a bigger studio than you started with? And what was that journey like?
Yeah, okay, I'll be fast. I'll try to be no more rambling anecdotes. We had Red Hook as a vehicle to be able to make Darkest Dungeon. We didn't set out to make a studio, we set out to make a game. Those are very different things. We deferred a lot of corporate stuff in favor of just being organized with loose shareholder agreement and getting off to the races, because ultimately the company has no value if the game has no value. When we went to do the sequel, we knew that we needed to staff up. We had been around for 5 years at that point, and so gradually, had upgraded the kind of like business end of things. Excuse me. And knowing that, we needed more staff to execute on the vision that we had for the second game, we knew that we needed more process, policy, structural organization, that kind of thing. And even that's not painless. It's hard to make a game and then make a company at the same time. But we sort of grew the company in proportionate response to the game we wanted to make, as opposed to, hey, the 4 of us are just going to start a company, and then we're just going to try to make money somehow so that we can keep the company going. That was never our philosophy at all. It was like, how do we make a video game? This is the game we want to make. We would call it like the heist model, where it's like you've got the guy in the van and the guy in the vents and the guy at the front distracting, whatever. And then you split up the diamonds at midnight and everybody goes their separate ways. But the heist went so well that we had to get the crew back together and realize that the heist model doesn't scale at all. And you can't bring more people in with diluting the people who did the first heist. So we had to work through a lot of logistics around that. But I wouldn't change the philosophy behind it. I think the game should come first. That's where you're going to get your money from, and that's where you're going to get your creative validation from. Not from like the deftness of your contracts, although they should be deft. But like, that isn't why we're doing this job. We're doing it to make things that are cool and fun and engaging and all these other buzzwords. So I think the company grows to support that effort as opposed to the effort trying to keep pace with the company itself, if that makes sense.
Okay. Another Halloween photo. What a surprise. These are the only photos of people from the studio. There's one every Halloween. At least only ones on the Twitter page. Okay, what are the differences between leading or like working with an established dev team versus running your own studio?
Like the differences between being like a lead somewhere or?
Yeah.
It's not your money. When you're like a lead working for somebody else, you just, you don't have the awareness of like the ups and downs of the business and the revenue of the game and what that means for the future. You just don't have that stress, and you shouldn't, right? You're working for someone else. It's their job to have that and hold that stress. And I mean, thank God with all the layoffs that the shareholders are okay, right? That's the real important thing to take away from this past year. But it's important that your staff, I think, be unencumbered by a lot of that stuff, because if everyone's worried about the finances of the game or the ins and outs of how the business is working, they can't focus on their jobs. That isn't to say you shouldn't be transparent, and we really value that. We try to be as completely candid with our staff as possible. But that is the fundamental difference in my experience, is that you're not just working on the ship, you're like plotting the course, looking at the horizon. If you hit a rock, it's your responsibility. I think I was talking to Galen the other night when there was like only a couple of us in the office. Like, I make a lot of decisions about our game. Creatively, structurally, like there's a lot of, without like trying to pat myself, there's a lot of me in that game, but the price is that if it flops or it sucks, it's on me, and you need to be able to own that. That difference in reviews from the first to the second, like I own it. I'm completely comfortable with it, and I'll answer any questions anybody has about it. But that's the price of like steering the ship, is that you have to take accountability if you bump into a rock. And I think a lot of times people love steering, but they don't love fixing the hull after they crash it, you know?
Okay, what do you think is the biggest challenge with starting an indie game studio now, is if you were starting one now?
It's been a pretty awful year and a half. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde situation where there've never been more releases and never been more layoffs. It's like it's never been a better time to be a gamer, but it's like the worst time to be a developer. But the fundamental challenges haven't changed. You need some money in the bank, you need a clear vision, you need an agreement between the partners so that when you disagree, you have a couple of clauses to go back to. So you need a clean, elegant structure or partnership, however you want to do it. You need money and a vision, and you need the wherewithal to follow it through. Those are the biggest challenges to starting any business, never mind a video game business. And whatever the industry is going through now, it'll be, you know, it'll be what it is, but people are still going to start companies, people are still going to make games. It's not going away. And I don't think that the biggest challenges have really changed. Like, yeah, VC money might be a little tight right now because interest rates are high, and that's about as much as I know about business. But you know, you can still put together a network, you can still take it to crowdfunding, you can still bootstrap it and get a demo out. You still have all of these options. In fact, more so than even when we started. So I don't think the biggest challenges have changed based on the past 10 years, but they are very, very big challenges, you know? Hey, hey, you can do one.
Could you have imagined the growth of local indie studios when you were starting Red Hook back then? So here in Vancouver.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a bunch of us would all go to these like full indie meetups and hang out and talk to each other, and it was like a pretty magical time. Like, it reminds me a bit of like when you read about musicians in New York in like the 70s, and they're like, oh, we'd all go to this one bar, and you're like, how were all these famous, incredible people at one bar? I'm not calling, that's not it. But the idea that there was a community and there was like a critical mass of like talent and drive and ambition and hard work, which is the most important of all of those. So yeah, I could imagine the success. Like, Ryan Clark's an incredible guy. Same with Maddie and Noel, like Greg Lobanov. Like, there's these amazing individuals who surround themselves with amazing individuals. You can't help but feel that the rising tide kind of lifts all ships. So I actually feel like it was quite a magical time. I think back on it and like all the people that I met, people I was exposed to, the little adventures that we kind of had. And just the sense that we were all part of this like generation. What's really messed up though is being like, I'm not part of that generation anymore. Like, you age out, which is like, I always hated Lord of the Rings because Bilbo was old. And I feel like, you know, the heroes should never get old. And then you like look in the mirror and you're like, holy shit, like, give me the ring back, you know?
Okay, just a few more. So, oh wow, another Halloween photo. What a surprise. So what's next for your team in Red Hook, and what challenges do you foresee and hope to overcome? Very formal way to put it.
Yeah, just a gigantic question. We did very well last year despite the launch window. We had 4 days before Tears of the Kingdom. A week and a half after that was Diablo 4. Then it was Starfield. Critique Starfield all you want. It's Bethesda's like massive howitzer into the industry. Every big company released their massive game last year, it felt like. So the fact that we had a great launch and we held our own was like pretty amazing. But I feel like the trend has kind of moved away from indie development. Like, platforms aren't that excited about the fact that you're an indie. Whereas if you go back like, I don't know, 6, 8 years, being an indie was like of note. They had outreach programs at PlayStation and at Xbox for indies. They were way more enthused about the whole idea. I feel like now there's so much AAA, they don't need to worry so much about us. They're not as excited about the fact that you make a small game with a small, passionate team. They're like, okay, we know, you know. And that's okay. But it means that, you know, the going is getting tough, I think, for indie studios and mid-size operations like ours. So I don't take for granted, like, we've been very successful, but I don't take that for granted for a second. We always wonder and challenge ourselves between Tyler and I, how are we vulnerable? Like, where are we weak? What's the worst case scenario? What's a likely scenario? We don't really worry about best case because that usually just solves all its own problems. So we're going to try to do something surprising this year. We're going to reinvest in Darkest Dungeon 2. I guess I'm leaking a little bit, but like we're working on enriching that game in a way that is like unexpected and hopefully creates a little bit of that delight and wonderment in our players. And if that echoes out and generates, you know, more interest or converts wish lists, great, but it is something that we want to do and that we're excited to do. So I guess it ties together everything I've been saying. We're trying to live the philosophy that I'm outlining a little bit. Business is important. We're in this to make money and to create jobs and stability in our lives and for our employees. But sometimes the best way to do that is to take a little risk. And if you look at the ways that we've expanded our games in the past, every single one of them is different. Every single thing we've ever made at Red Hook is different. And I think that's artistic.
Ooh, okay, so I put this photo here because this is what I've been playing last night. I started it at like 8 p.m. and I already have 9 hours on Steam. But yeah, what is your outlook for people looking to make a living in games today, whether that's starting their own thing or working somewhere?
I'm not sure my outlook is relevant. I don't have the perspective of someone trying to start out. I don't know exactly the specific challenges that someone who's like 22 years old is facing when I'm staring down my 47th birthday. Like, I respect that your lives are different from mine. And that's not a cop-out. I think that how you choose to make a living is so individual. I would recommend working for someone else before you start your own thing. I think personally, if I look back at my own history, I avoided a lot of mistakes with Red Hook that I would have made if I hadn't have been driven up the wall by clients or by a weird boss who had like strange proclivities, or, you know, like you learn as you are inconvenienced in your career, as you are knocked down and your work is disregarded, or they rip it out of the game and don't tell you, or you get disrespected in a meeting. I've had all of these things happen to me. I got chewed out in front of like all the senior management because they didn't like a character from a game, ridiculous stuff. But as you accumulate these kind of like wounds and scar tissue, you gain wisdom, and intelligence and wisdom are separate in Dungeons and Dragons, and I never understood why until I understand what wisdom actually was, and that's just intelligence based on experience, not just smarts. And so I would recommend working. Do the thing. If you want to make a little game in your spare time, make the game in your spare time, follow it through and get it finished. Work for somebody else. Learn what it's like to not be able to execute your own ideas all the time and develop that humility. It will serve you well when you are able to steer your own ship. There is no like wasted experience, I guess. So just work your asses off. That's the only way any of this is gonna happen for you. And you're gonna have to work through times of low money and times of high stress. And you can try to take care of your mental health. I don't know how to do that. That's a different person's talk. I've learned a few things, but I've also learned that there is no substitute for hard work and for being punched in the face a few times. So go get hit in the face and you'll be fine.
I guess, yeah, there we go. But yes, one question, you raised hand first.
So it's a bit of a double one here. The first is,
It's a smart move. You slipped in the second question.
so how does working on a project, a fair bit of like dark subject matter, take its toll over a development period where there's already a lot of external stress? You know, I've heard of people from Dead Space or Mortal Kombat just kind of getting a little jaded, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that watching gore and dismemberment does something different than like existential cosmic horror. I delight in it like I delight in the rain. Like there's nothing better than a good horror movie that leaves you guessing and has a twist. A Dark Song is an amazing horror movie, no gore, just a cool idea. And I think horror movies and horror stuff is like one of the last places where ideas can run kind of unbridled. But that's different than watching someone get cut to pieces over and over and over and over again, which I could understand would burn somebody out. But all of the gore and stuff that I draw is like, it's got a little like Salt Bay of cute all over it. Like it's not the worst thing in the world. So it hasn't affected me that way. I can't wait to do something. I was so stoked for our DLC with the vampire bug people. I went to the only other artist I had at the time, Trudy, and I'm like, look, I need to take a noblewoman, have a aristocratic man kill her, turn her upside down, slit her throat, drain her blood into a bunch of wine glasses and feed it to people, and it turns them into bug monsters. But I don't want it to be like kind of misogynist. And it was great fun, you know? It's gory and grotesque, but like you throw the overwrought narration on top of it, like the really cool music, you frame it in kind of a gothic, melodramatic, poetic way. It's not Dead Space.
Okay, so it's about finding the art in it.
Yeah, I think so. There you go.
The other half that kind of lends onto that is, I've noticed on a lot of personal projects or other experiences, the first couple of weeks, you know, you run into this, you're high energy, you're like, yeah, let's go get her done. And then anywhere from 2 to 6 months in, you're like, when does this roller coaster end? Like, this is a mess we're working with here. So how do you keep that energy? How do you keep that drive? How do you stay steady through the real tough times?
You have to accept that the excitement is just the appetizer. I'm back on the food. Making the game is the grind. That is quintessentially what we are doing. There's no escaping it. You can pad it a little bit, but it's always going to happen to a level that is uncomfortable because it's grunt work. And you have to do a lot of it, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And none of those words, when you combine them, you can't make a fun sentence out of any of those like adjectives. So you have to just accept that this is the nature of the path, the business, the work, the career that you've chosen. It's built in. The excitement is just a fun little thing, and so is the catharsis when you launch. Feels good. Oh my God, it's done. And then the next day you're like, you know what would be really cool? And it's like pregnancy where like you don't remember. My wife didn't remember how bad it was having the first kid. She's like, so, probably have a second one. I'm like, what are you talking about? That was terrible. But it's the same with making a game. It's like, that's what we're doing. So get used to it. There's no other way to say it.
You had responsibility to your backers because you crowdfunded the first one. So then you had somebody to...
I didn't do it for the backers. I didn't do it for the streamers. I didn't do it for the guys who leave Steam reviews. I did it to make a game that I thought would be really great. And I could have had 5 times as many backers, and with half as much motivation, I would have found a way to squirrel out of it. Not a problem. I think you just have to come face to face with the fact that you've chosen a very, very difficult job. And there's no sugarcoating it. And so maybe that's your first punch in the face.
And thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you very much for listening.
That was really good.